Hi, everybody. Today is Tuesday, March 3rd, 2026, and our dear friend or brother, Professor Marandi, is here with us. Welcome back, Professor.
Thank you, Nima. It's a great pleasure being with you.
Let me start, Professor Marandi, with the latest post on Donald Trump's account on Truth Social. He says that their air defense, he's talking about Iran, their air defense, Air Force, Navy, and the leadership is gone. They want to talk. I said too late. What is your response to that? How does it reflect the reality of what's going on?
Well, I guess it's over then, Nima, so we don't need to continue the discussion. It's time for us to surrender, I suppose, and I'll just end it with my surrender to the U.S. Armed Forces. But again, that's when during the 12-day war, I'm sure you recall, Trump demanded unconditional surrender, and he was constantly posting how he can kill the leader, and all that sort of outrageous nonsense. And he was gloating about how they were deceitful at the negotiating table and how bad things were from Iraq on the Iranian side. And then it turned out when the halt in hostilities took place, he actually admitted that Iran gave the Israelis a beating. And then, of course, we learned from other sources that the Israelis had been seeking a ceasefire for days, and Trump was trying to get that ceasefire for them. So that unconditional surrender didn't go that well. This time, they thought that, well, Iran wasn't a house of cards. So what we'll do is we'll mobilize everything we have. The anti-forever war Trump said, we'll mobilize everything. And they did. They brought a huge amount of weapons and jets and ships to the region. And they attacked alongside their sidekick, or maybe they're the sidekick to the Israeli regime, who knows? But they failed. And the murder of Ayatollah Khamenei, his martyrdom, made people outraged, not just in Iran, but across the region and beyond. You see Ayatollah Khamenei now being mourned in places that you could never have imagined. In Iraq, it's like Iran. You have huge crowds on the streets. So what they did, Trump, was they called for the Iranians to come to the streets, but the Iranians came for the exact opposite reason that Trump was demanding. They came to commemorate the martyr, Ayatollah Khamenei. They came to condemn the United States. I don't know if you can hear, they're bombing right now. They came to defend the Islamic Republic and to reject the empire, and demanding the armed forces to strike back, and to strike back hard and harder. This is because the United States and the West, the collective West, never understood Iran. They look at Iran from a racist, Orientalist point of view. They see it as incapable of governing itself, being backward, unpopular, about to implode. They've been saying it for well over 40 years. I said this before on another program. I've been doing these weekly programs on Al-Mayadeen called Demystifying Iran. And the last one that I did last Friday, it was about how the narrative of Iran always collapsing remains the same over decades. So the same things that are being said today by the New York Times and the Washington Post were being said in the 1980s and the 1990s and at the beginning of the new century. You could put those articles or those, excuse me, or those phrases or the headlines in today's reports, and you wouldn't notice the difference. Back then, they were saying people are sick and tired of the revolution. The younger generation, they were saying in the 1990s, they don't want this anymore. They want something different. There's a second revolution brewing, and it's always the same. But this collapse in Iran has been collapsing for 47 years, and now the Americans are waging war against the country, along with the Israeli regime, with everything they have, and the country is steadfast and resilient. Last night and the night before, throughout the country, there were huge gatherings. You know this, tens of millions of people. In Tehran, they didn't have a single gathering. They had multiple gatherings for safety purposes, I assume, like 20 or so gatherings. Each one had tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people. Some maybe 10, some hundreds of thousands of people. And I put some videos of last night and the night before in my Telegram channel, so that people could sort of see what Tehran looked like. Other cities, it's just too much. But the point is that in some cases, if you look at the videos, the Israeli and the American regimes are bombing the city. And you see anti-aircraft defenses working, and people won't budge. Men and women, they're chanting slogans saying, "We're prepared to be martyred." It's unbelievable. Well, for me, it's believable, but it's stunning, and I think it should be unbelievable for these fools in the White House and across the West, and the Guardian and the Breitbart, and which are more or less the same thing when it comes to imperialism and the empire in Iran in particular. So, on the one hand, through the martyrdom of Ayatollah Khamenei, they made Iran more resilient. They made Iranians more united. They've made people across the region outraged. They've made the international community look at the United States with disgust. And simultaneously, they went and murdered 165 or so kids and 10 or 20 teachers, almost simultaneously in Minab. And the Western media, the BBC, CNN, they ignore it. All of the Western media, because for them, Iranian kids are worthless. And that has had a big effect on this small minority of people who are on the streets with the rioters, these young kids who are foolishly fooled into believing these Western narratives. They're seeing with their own eyes that Iran was negotiating. The Omani foreign minister said significant progress was made. And then they went and murdered the leader. And then these young people saw that the leader was not prepared, not willing to leave his house or his office, because he said that many struggling Iranians have nowhere to go. So I'm not leaving either. That is the person who is leading our country. That is the person who through his brilliance created a military program that costed much less than the military expenditures of neighboring countries, but was far more effective. Underground cities of drones and missiles and indigenous technology. So the Americans, the regime in Washington, and the Zionist regime, they cannot destroy these facilities, and most of them are still untouched. They haven't even used them. Most of the underground bases have not been even functioning yet. They haven't been working yet. They're waiting for orders. So more or less the bases that were used during the previous war are being used, and some of the bases to the south directed towards the Persian Gulf. And they're beating back the enemy. So Trump has united Iranians more than before, united Iran's allies more than before, created outrage across the region and beyond more than ever before. And militarily, despite the ugly and brutal behavior of the United States, bombing hospitals, bombing schools, bombing radio and television. I was at Iranian television last night till 12 p.m. on an Iranian program. An hour later, when I arrived home, they bombed IRIB. They bombed Iranian television, the complex. And the night before, they also bombed it, because I went to that TV channel I went to the previous building. I didn't know it had been bombed. And they told me, no, it was, I saw the building damaged, and they said they moved it to another place. So I went to this other place last night. And then, as I said, an hour later, so they bomb radio. Do Western journalists, do these mercenaries of the Epstein class, do they condemn the bombing of radio, national radio and television? No. About the 260 Palestinian journalists who were slaughtered during the ongoing genocide in Gaza. They didn't care. And of course, the many journalists in Lebanon who've been slaughtered, and as we speak, the Israeli regime is slaughtering civilians in Lebanon as before. And again, Western journalists, Western regimes look away because they allow the Israeli regime to get away with anything. So Iran militarily has been, I mean, they're hurting us. They're killing people. They carry out double tap strikes. One of our actually an acquaintance of both of us, so I'll tell you after the show, he was a witness to a double tap attack where they made Ferdowsi Square, and then when people gathered to find people under the rubble, they struck it again. These are the monsters that we're dealing with. They can't take out the underground cities. They can't do anything about Iran's military capabilities, so they take it out on women and children. They take it out on ordinary people. This is the essence of this Epstein coalition, this Epstein army, or these two Epstein armies that are expressing rage against ordinary Iranians because they failed on the battlefield.
I think one of the signs that they're hitting this civilian, infrastructure and, the homes of the people is because they don't have the information they had before 12-day war. And that network of spies being destroyed by Iranian intelligence, it seems that they don't have it, as we saw in Yemen, where they didn't have any. They were running out of choice in Yemen, out of target. That was the reason that they targeted. They hit all these. They went after the people who were gathering. If you remember, during the Eid, it wasn't. Yeah, and they hit the civilians, killing civilians. Donald Trump bragging about it on his social media, and they're doing the same. Is that the case? You're living in Tehran. You've seen the targets right now in Tehran. Where are they targeting?
Well, in the case of Yemen, you're absolutely correct. There was a gathering. They were in a circle, and that was a part of their traditional gatherings, and they bombed it. Whether it was intentional or not, I don't have any way to know, but they never expressed shame and remorse for it. No one in the West apologized for slaughtering those little girls and little kids in that elementary school. No one. Western media, the BBC, CNN, none of them cared. And that shows a great deal about who they are. And it showed who they are to Iranians, to these young Iranians, some of these young Iranians who were deceived through their Persian media empire, the West Persian media empire. Now they see reality. But I think that you're absolutely correct. Their intelligence networks have been smashed. We saw last time round that Iran's air defenses had much greater difficulty. This time round, they've been downing drones left and right. And American and Israeli jets are firing missiles from afar, even though the force is much greater than the 12-day war. The American presence is much greater than the entire Israeli military capability. So, but they don't care. I'm sure they know. They knew that they were bombing hospitals. I'm sure they knew they were bombing a school. I mean, how could they not know? You can find it on Google Map. It's not like it's obvious. Or the Gandhi Hospital in Tehran that was bombed. They went and hit the IVF unit. So women who were trying for years to have kids, now what are they going to do? They hit the infant department. They hit a hospital in the south, one near the Iraqi border. In Khuzestan, they bombed multiple hospitals. Is that a coincidence? No, of course not. That's who these people are, both the American regime and the Israeli regime. In the Israelis, we all remember what they did to every single hospital. At the beginning, Western media every time tried to provide them with excuses and behaved as apologists. But then when they just destroyed hospital after hospital, instead of trying to justify it, they just ignored it. You recall when they pulled the plugs on those incubators, the Israelis, and allowed the babies in the incubators to all die. You would have thought that the entire West would have just sanctioned the Israeli regime. No, of course not. They are the master race. So, and of course, schools, and that's what they do. They rape kids and kill kids, and now they bomb kids. So there are no. I don't think these were because of a lack of intelligence. They don't have the intelligence that they had before. You're absolutely correct. Day one, the attacks to kill senior military officials largely failed. The leader, of course, was murdering him was no intelligence coup. He was in his office. He was in his residence. His wife was murdered. His granddaughter was murdered. His son-in-law was murdered. There was no secret there. But the Americans always pretend that they're much more than the regime, I mean, they're much more efficient and effective, and the Zionists are the same as that which they really are. But now, after a number of days of fighting, we see that the Iranians are hitting very hard, and they still haven't. They're basically using their older missiles. Nima, the Iranians are using 20-year-old missiles, and they're going right through the defenses. They're using, I don't know, 15. I don't know exactly about the drones, but they're using drones that are probably just as old to strike targets, U.S. targets and U.S. assets in the Persian Gulf region. And they can't stop them. And their defenses are not working. And the Iranians still have not been using their more recent, their top-notch technology. So this is all going bad for the United States. And the Iranians, they're not seeking a ceasefire. They are not interested in negotiations. They are determined to inflict a strategic defeat on the enemy so that this does not happen again. The Iranians are not interested in a ceasefire where the Americans and where the Epstein regime can regroup and then later carry out another attack. That's not going to happen. So Iran is going to punish the Americans, the Israelis, and indirectly these Arab regimes. Iran is not targeting them, but by targeting U.S. assets, these regimes finally understand how weak and vulnerable and what empty shells they are. And of course, Iran is holding the Strait of Hormuz. They've kept it closed. Those ships and tankers that obey Iranian orders are untouched, but they're not letting the oil get through. And a few of the ships, the tankers that tried to get through under American orders, they were all hit. So Iran is pushing up the price of oil, the price of gas, to increase pressure on Trump to end this. And of course, Iran is inflicting severe pain. Iran is also being hit. As I said, people are being killed, people are being murdered. And these are painful days for us. But we didn't start this war. They started it. And for us, this is an existential war. For them, it was a war of choice done for the sake of, Rubio basically admitted it, that this was done for Israel. So the American people are making sacrifices. They are losing money. Their citizens are being killed. And the price of energy is going up, all for the sake of a genocidal that is being supported by the Senate and the House and the other Israeli firsters that are controlling Washington.
Donald Trump said that he's surprised with the attacks on the Arab states in the Persian Gulf. you and I were talking about this for more than a year, and you were warning the United States that if they attack Iran, Iran would hit these Arab states in the Persian Gulf. And what is, do you think that he's somehow trying to say that, because after all, we know that how important are these bases for the United States, for the air defense system of Israel, because they're getting a lot of signals from the radars, mostly located in the bases, American bases in the Persian Gulf, to go after Iranian missiles. How could he say that? Because it's somehow, and the Arab states somehow, they feel that the United States left them without any support, without any help. What is your understanding of that?
I think Trump has surrounded himself with fools and Israeli firsters who don't care about the United States first and foremost. Their interests are in Israel, and the United States can make sacrifices for Israel. That's as far as they're concerned, that's fine. But also, it's hubris, it's arrogance, it's racism. They imagine themselves as being invincible, and of course, the Iranians are these Orientals that are incapable of fighting, and they're intimidated. And I think Pierce Morgan once said to me, a lot of hot air, when I said that this would happen. And he said, they're not going to do anything. It's that arrogance.
Yeah.
And now they're finding out the hard way. Why in the world should he be surprised? They have bases in each and every one of these countries. These bases are being used to conspire against Iran, whether in Qatar or in the Emirates or in Bahrain or in Saudi Arabia or in Oman or Kuwait. And of course, Jordan. And of course, Turkey. Turkey, the US bases in Turkey are being used against Iran. NATO AWACS jets are flying over Turkey, are being used against Iran. All of these regimes, despite the fact that the US ambassador to the Israeli regime said that if Israel takes the whole region, that's fine. But still, these fools are cooperating with the empire against Iran. And they all know that if Iran falls, and it will not fall, all of them, from Erdogan to these Persian Gulf regimes, they will be left naked in front of the enemy, every single one. But Iran will not fall. Iran will win this war. Iran will impose a strategic defeat on the United States, no doubt about it. Already, this image of this invincible American superpower is collapsing. The fact that Iran is striking again and again at US targets in these countries, and they're not just bases. The Americans have created huge infrastructure across the Persian Gulf. It's like they own these, well, it is, they do own these countries. And so they're using hotels, they have all sorts of infrastructure. They can do whatever they want. And so, but the Iranians are saying, wherever you are, wherever you have interests, wherever you have assets, we will target them. And Trump why would he be shocked? He's bombing hospitals. He's bombing schools. He bombed the leader's home and his office. So what is there for him to complain? They're bombing all of the public infrastructure across the country because they want to tear apart the social fabric of Iran. That's how sinister this regime is. And the reason why they're doing this is because they failed on the battlefield. They failed to take out Iran's military capabilities. But it's not going to work. And the longer this war lasts, the worse it's going to be for the United States. And this is going to be a turning point. The US empire in future will not be able to flex its muscles again like it did in the past, because it will take a beating from Iran. The price is going to be high. People will die. You can, every now and then you hear explosions. They're murdering people in Tehran and then carrying out double tap attacks to kill the first responders. Price will be high, but we have no choice. We have to defeat them. And I think with the economic problems at home and with the deep divisions of American society, it's going to be very difficult for Trump to sustain this war.
I think that the United States wants.
Right now, I can hear explosions. I don't know if you hear them.
Yeah.
But anyway, they're bombing the city.
Yeah. I think for this sort of war that Iran is prepared for, a war of attrition, artillery would be the king of the battle, and the United States is not prepared for that. We've learned from the what they're talking about right now, that they want to bring the THAAD system they have, the THAAD systems they have in South Korea to defend Israel. That show how desperate is the situation with the United States. With, they are talking about, Professor Marandi, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. What is the understanding on the part of Iranian? How many weeks or months is going to be this war?
The Iranians are in it for, they're prepared for a long war. And for them, it's not an issue of weeks, it's an issue of many months. And the underground bases, missile bases, drone bases are full of weapons. And the key weapons have not been used. And the anti-ship missiles and so on. And the disruption in the Persian Gulf, so far they've just shut it. And the Americans can't do anything about it. But if this escalates, then and those tankers are destroyed, and the oil and gas installations are destroyed, and even if later on there's a ceasefire and Iran opens up the Strait of Hormuz, where's the oil? Where's the gas? Where are the tankers to take them? It will be a permanent crisis, economic or energy crisis that will push the world into an economic depression. And who will be blamed? Trump, Netanyahu, the Epstein class, because the world knows who's started this war. It wasn't Iran. Iran wants to export its oil. It wants good relations with countries on the other side of the Persian Gulf, even though they're American proxies. But Iran is not going to sit idle when they are allowing their territory to be used to strike Iran. It's just not going to happen. And there's no doubt that the region has changed permanently. The Emirates will never again be the Emirates. Bahrain, the regime in Bahrain will never be like what it was before, if it exists, and if these regimes exist in the months ahead or weeks ahead. Qatar will never be the same. They now see how weak and vulnerable they are, and people across the world see how weak and vulnerable they are. No sane person is going to invest there in future. And personally, my expectation is when this war is open, when this war is over, that the Iranian government will tell the Arab regimes in the Persian Gulf, you have to pay compensation. Whether you pay in gold or whatever, it doesn't make it, you have to pay compensation. And if you don't, we won't let you export your oil. That is my personal view. That's, I think, the view of many. But in any case, the map is going to change. These regimes, they are now recognizing that the Americans are not there to defend them. All these bases were for the Israeli regime. And now, as the example that you gave is really fascinating. South Korean security, or so-called security, can easily be sacrificed for the sake of Israel. Everything can be sacrificed for the sake of Israel. So U.S. allies should wake up. The U.S. is not an ally. The U.S. is only there for, because it's an empire. They're there to impose their will, and they're willing to sacrifice its so-called allies for the sake of the genocidal regime in Tel Aviv.
I think it's already proven for the Arab states, if there is someone in these states to understand the reality of what's going on. Professor Marandi, we know that they wanted to do regime change, so-called regime change in Iran, but something is happening in the Arab states, basically, particularly in Bahrain. The people are coming out against the state. How do you see the situation of the region in terms of the people who are not happy with the leadership, with what they were doing, considering the policies in Gaza and toward Israel?
Well, are you surprised that Western media is not concerned about human rights violations in Arab countries, in Bahrain and elsewhere, how people are dissatisfied with the policies of their governments, but they have no role to play in the decision-making process? Do you see that in the Guardian or in the BBC or on CNN? No, it's the Iranian regime. Even though these Arab family dictatorships have no meaningful elections, and these are just ruling families. In some cases, like in Kuwait, a bit more flexible. In other places like Qatar and the Emirates, it's just a family. But and of course with Bahrain too. So and Saudi Arabia, an absolute monarchy. So basically, what we're seeing now is that dissatisfaction across the region is growing, and people across the region are recognizing, except for the elites that are affiliated to these despotic regimes, or those who are on the payroll. And there are lots of people on the payroll, lots of people on Qatari payroll, lots of people on, no need to go there. But people on the streets know, they recognize that their regimes are doing nothing against Israel. They're doing nothing to protect them, let alone, to protect the Palestinians, let alone them. When the US ambassador says if Israel takes a region, fine, you would expect governments to reassess their policies and to reorganize their military to protect their territory against the Israeli regime. But you're having none of that. And people are angry. People see Ayatollah Khamenei as a brave martyr, and their own regimes all proxies bound to the West. That creates further a greater environment for instability, because at some point you may see uprisings. You see it in Bahrain, but you can see it elsewhere. You can envisage it happening in other countries that feel humiliated that their territory is being used by the West to attack Israel's enemies and to attack those who oppose the genocide. So none of this is good for these dictatorships, and thus none of it's good for the United States. And while some say that it's good for Israel, I don't think it's good for Israel. The Israeli regime does not benefit from US proxies in the region being weak. That's my opinion.
Yeah. Tucker Carlson said that there were Mossad agents in Saudi Arabia and Qatar. They were arrested because they wanted to bomb these two countries. I would assume they wanted to put the blame on Iran. And in some cases, because Iran, so far, what we've seen, Iran is focusing on the American bases. And what is your understanding of that? And the Israelis, the leadership was somehow cooperating, totally cooperating with the Israelis and Americans, and they see they're coming to sabotage something in Saudi Arabia, in Qatar, other Arab states.
Yes, the Iranians have said we had nothing to do with the attacks on Aramco. And so if we look at what Dr. Carlson says, and he is very, very well connected to the political establishment in the United States, then one can guess that perhaps these were carried out by the Israeli regime. But in any case, the Israeli regime was trying to, from what he's saying, to create chaos in these countries, either to push them towards war with Iran, which they would immediately lose. They wouldn't last at all because they have no capabilities. They're completely dependent on oil. If their oil infrastructure is targeted, then it's finished. They have nothing else. It's not like they're not like Iran. Most of them are just tiny family dictatorships anyway. So either they want them to push them towards war with Iran, or they have to create hostility among the populations towards Iran, or fear and confusion. Who knows? But I would imagine that what they wanted to do is to drag Iran, these countries, towards war. But as I said, what can they do? Just like the British and the French and the Germans, what are they going to do against Iran? They have no capabilities. They're already stuck in Ukraine and losing the war in Ukraine. Their armies are not fit for even protecting their own borders, let alone projecting power against a country like Iran. So, yes, the Israeli regime is what Tucker Carlson says is, I think, very important, not just the information itself, but the fact that Tucker Carlson is saying. And it just shows that a lot of people in the United States who have a great deal of influence are unhappy. And Tucker Carlson was someone who was key to Trump's reelection. Trump owes him. Although Trump, he's too arrogant to ever acknowledge owing anyone anything except for his Zionist overlords who fund him. But Tucker Carlson was key to his reelection. And when Tucker Carlson says these things about the Israeli regime and the war taking place, that is weakening the position of the Trump regime in being able to continue the war for a very long period of time.
It seems that the United States has moved most of their weapons from Jordan to Cyprus in order to save them from getting hit by the Iranian missiles. And do you think that the time is coming that Iran would hit? If Cyprus participate, it shows some sort of cooperation, the way that it would be obvious for Iranian military, they're going to hit Cyprus?
Why not? Yes, I think they are seriously contemplating pounding the air base in Cyprus. Yes, without a doubt. And the Iranians have shown their resolve across the region that they will not tolerate the U.S. presence anymore. They will not tolerate Israeli and U.S. airstrikes on hospitals and schools and Iranian radio and television and infrastructure and the murder of all of these innocent people. We're seeing the funerals every day. The mass funeral for the kids in Minab was held this morning. The Iranians are not going to hold back. They will punish them if they feel that the threat is coming from that direction, without a doubt.
Donald Trump wants the Iranian people to do the heavy lifting for him, and he says that we are here, we are bombing them, we are doing this and that. And what is, Professor Marandi, where does this come from? Because it's so much disconnected with the reality of what's going on in Iran. But for you, that you understand the West, you understand the mindset of these people, where does it come from that they cannot understand, they don't want to understand the reality of Iran?
It's racism, it's Orientalism, it's this sense of superiority that they have. They look down upon everyone else. They cannot comprehend the fact that Iran is a stable country which has popular legitimacy, which is sophisticated and complex, which has an ideology that's makes its people resilient and strong, and that it has a thriving civil society, and that it is more than capable of defending itself, and it has moral principles, which the West does not even know what that means. Iran has moral principles. It's opposed to genocide. It will stand up against genocide. In the West, if you say that, they would say this is propaganda. This is a mouthpiece of the regime, as they like to say. But that is the reality. That is why they fail against Iran. That is why they're unable to defeat Iran. And that's why you see that they've brought everything they have to the battlefield, and they still cannot succeed.
I think right now the mostly important question would be what Iran would do to Israel, because so far what we've seen, it was all the Arab states. Most of these bases were neutralized, if we can put it this way. And the main target, it would be the Israeli, the territory so-called Israel today, and Iran would be the main target of the Iranian army. How do you see that? Do you think that Iran would go just escalating, or you see Iran going gradually, little by little, attacking Israel?
Well, the Iranians are hitting Israel very hard and on a regular basis. And they control the state of the conflict. In other words, if the Iranians want to escalate, they will escalate. and there's nothing that the Americans can do about it, or the Israeli regime. So Iran is hitting Israel very hard. There's a lot of censorship. The Americans and the Israelis are failing on many fronts. Iran's anti-drone capabilities are much better now. As you were alluding to earlier, the Israelis and Americans, their intelligence on the ground and their collaborators are not successful like they were on during the first day of the 12-day war. So obviously Iranian intelligence is doing a lot better. If Iran chooses to escalate, it will. And if Iran, and not just with regards to the Israeli regime, but also with regards to the Persian Gulf. If push comes to shove, that'll be the end of all those assets. And the same will be true in the Caucasus. So the Americans should be very careful about the future days and weeks.
Do we know that Iran shot down 3 fighter jets, American fighter jets, and what was the air defense system being used? Because many people are asking what it was. Bavar, it was S-300. Which was that? Do you have any information on that?
No, but Iran's air defense systems are integrated, and they have, from my understanding, multiple Iranian systems. They have Russian systems, and I'm guessing they have Chinese systems too. The Americans, of course, say there was friendly fire, which I think is a very stupid thing to say, because I find that more embarrassing. That's saying that my own air defenses are so terrible.
Yeah. It seems that we've lost Professor Marandi. Let me check out if it's going to be. Yeah. It's going to get back just in a second. Let me just, yeah. He's out right now. I assume that he's going to switch to other signal, Wi-Fi signal, and he's going to be back in a moment. I'm trying to contact him. Yeah, he's going to be back. He's going to be back. Yeah. I think one of the main points that many people want to know is who's using and how Iran is using the air defense system, because so far, you see in the mainstream media that the United States is controlling everything over Iran. That's not the case. Let me see what the Professor Marandi. He's going to be back. He said he's going to be back. Yeah. The main question is the air defense system right now, because Donald Trump, as I've mentioned, he said that the air defense system is totally out. We have destroyed the air defense system of Iran, and they have nothing to defend themselves. That's why they're begging for, to talk with us. That's not the case, from what we've heard from Professor Marandi. My understanding is the same, that Iran knows what's going on and how to defend itself, because they have, as Professor Marandi mentioned, they have the Chinese, Iranian, Russian air defense systems to defend Iran, and they all integrated into a system, into a unique system that is all connected. They know what they're doing, communicating with each other. And this was a huge operation. Huge, mission on the part of Iranians to get all these different, because we haven't seen this in Ukraine, for example. They're sending a lot of weapons to Ukraine. Yeah, Professor Marandi is back. Professor, you were talking about the air defense system and how you said that we have a Russian air defense system, Iranian, and together with some Chinese, and they all working together as a unique, sort of defense system.
Yeah, that's my understanding. And Iran has multiple air defense systems, and the Iranian made, but also they've purchased from abroad, and they've been very successful in bringing down drones. The Americans and Israelis are not entering Iranian airspace, as far as I know. And by the way, the very fact that these planes were down in Kuwait shows that how complicit these regimes are. That the Americans are using their airspace to bomb Iran, and Kuwait, of course, alongside it, Saudi Arabia. So these countries are all a part of the war against Iran. And if Iran closes the Strait of Hormuz, they have nothing to complain about.
It's already, the Strait of Hormuz is not working anymore. As I know, it seems that is, and is Iran doing something? How does Iran do this? And is it all about the Navy? Because Donald Trump said the Navy is gone. How is that possible if the Navy is gone? And in Iran, as far as I know, they didn't use any sort of mine in this strait.
Well, that's exactly the point. Trump talks nonsense. If what he says has happened, then all these ships should be making their way to their destinations, but none of them will. And the 7 or 8 ships that tried under American orders, they were all hit. So the rest of the ships know, the captains know better than to try to do that again. There's nothing the Americans can do about it. And the Iranians will, and this is all stuff that you and I have been discussing for, as you said early on in the show, for well over a year now, maybe for 2 years, I don't know. And other guests of yours. It's not like this is something, that should surprise anyone. Your regular viewers who are all very politically aware people, they were all, I'm sure, expecting this to happen. But in the West, Trump himself says, I was surprised. Well, maybe he should start listening to your show.
One of the basic questions many people want to know is the leadership of Iran. We know that the council, there is, what can you say about the leadership in Iran right now, and who's leading the country?
Well, we have in accordance with the Constitution, a 3-person council, the head of the judiciary, the president, of course, and a representative from the Guardian Council. And they will assume the role of leadership until the new leader is chosen. But of course, because of when the U.S. bombs the leader and bombs children in school, obviously there are security issues. So the Council of Experts, which chooses the new leader, and which can remove leaders according to the Constitution, they will announce the new leader when the time comes. But for security reasons, their meeting has to be kept secret. Their results will be declared. The result will be declared whenever they feel it necessary. But as you see, and as people are seeing, the Iranian armed forces are working with great competence. There are no big lines across the country for bread or for gasoline. Everyone is calm. And that shows the brilliance of Ayatollah Khamenei. Not only was he a great thinker, a man who was fluent in 4 languages, who was a man of literature, who was an intellectual, who was courageous, who went to jail multiple times during the Shah and tortured, who fought as a volunteer in the war, who returned to the war as the president near the end when things were difficult, when the United States joined Saddam Hussein. It was very dangerous for him. He was a target, but he went to the front lines and stayed there till the war came to an end. Not only was he a brilliant military leader who designed this system that allowed Iran to defend itself against this evil empire. Not only was he a moral man who supported the oppressed and the marginalized, and constantly told different presidents in Iran to focus on the marginalized and those who are struggling. But he was this great supporter of Palestine, of the oppressed in Latin America, and the Southern African struggle against apartheid. All of that aside, he devised a system that after his demise, under war and maximum pressure sanctions, is able to function and defeat a superpower. That is extraordinary. That is unbelievably extraordinary.
The other dimension of the war, Professor Marandi, is what we were talking about, as you mentioned, like other things for such a long time, is how the Iranian allies in the region would react. We see right now the nature of the relationship between Iran and the allies. Iran didn't ask them to join. They joined by themselves. We had Houthis, we had Iraq, Hezbollah in Iraq, we had Hezbollah in Lebanon has joined. And when you look at the whole situation, Hezbollah right now, as we talk, they have destroyed one of the Israeli tanks in the southern part of Lebanon, because they say that Hezbollah should be disarmed. That's not the case anymore. And how do you see all these groups coming together and working with each other? You mentioned the Iranian, Chinese, and Russian air defense system, but when it comes to some sort of integration between Iran and these allies, is that happening?
Oh, yes. I mean, for all of them, this is an existential war. And all of them are prepared. Yemen is prepared. They're preparing themselves as we speak. And the United States cannot manage this situation. Yemen is too big and powerful. And when it fights alongside Iran, and then the resistance in Iraq, and then Lebanon, things will collapse. The Americans cannot do this. Iran is in control. The escalation ladder is something that the Iranians can play with as they move forward, the Iranians and their allies. The Americans, in their arrogance, the Zionists in their arrogance, do not see that, or maybe they are beginning to see, who knows, that they are not invincible. And the resistance is becoming increasingly popular. And Ayatollah Khamenei's martyrdom has had a regional and global impact. I don't see things ending well for the United States.
Yeah.
It's painful. It's painful, Nima. When right now, like 2 minutes ago, there were explosions. And I know they've killed kids and families because they don't care about human beings, these Epstein monsters. But Iran will persevere, and Iran will emerge stronger, and Iran's antagonists will be weaker, and Iran's allies will emerge stronger. And General Soleimani once famously said, "We are the nation of Imam Hussein." I think the Americans should start seriously contemplating that sentence and do some research and try to figure out where they're getting things wrong.
They have no clue about that, Professor Marandi. I'm sure. Whoever follows the mainstream media in the West totally understands that they have no clue about what you've just said. And Professor Marandi, Israeli officials claim the latest strike targeted the Assembly of Experts, the legal body responsible for selecting a new supreme leader for Iran. It seems that nobody was in that building. The building was empty when they attacked. Is that the case?
I wasn't following the news. Apparently, they said yesterday they bombed the parliament, and I guess they were. But then someone told me that the parliament. I mean, not someone told me. I read somewhere that the parliament wasn't actually hit. I don't know, but I'm sure that they would never have such a meeting in a place like that. The way in which that meeting will be conducted will be in a manner where it will be safe for them to make their decision if the decision has not yet already been made. But they're not going to go and sit in parliament and start discussing the new leader when the Trump regime and the Epstein regime and the Zionist regime are out to kill anyone who they can find.
Or their puppet, which would be,
yeah.
yeah. Thank you, Professor Marandi, for being with us today. Great pleasure, as always.
Thank you very much for having me.